The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Nick Fantasy. They're coming to customers. Play just $5, get $100 bonus funds. Use promo code SGPN. And welcome everyone to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It's currently Tuesday night, November 11th, around 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm Rosso Reichel once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into the breakdown of the two matchups taking place on Wednesday in the ATP Tour Finals in Turin. So before we get into any of the actual breakdown of those two matchups, and before we get into a recap of the last episode, a reminder, like, subscribe on YouTube. A reminder, you can also find the podcast audio only on Spotify or Apple. So no matter how you actually consume the podcast, to help leave some feedback to help the show grow, like, subscribe on YouTube, leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple. Plus, a reminder, you can check out the merch store on the SGPN website. We have a lot of great merch for tennis, sweatshirts, we have t-shirts, we have mugs, high quality. I think you'll enjoy the options we have. So make sure to check out the merch store for the other shows as well, not just the tennis show. Plus, a reminder, you can also check out all of the podcasts on SGPN for free. Get every episode of every show in one convenient feed. Search SGPN on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Apple, etc., to subscribe today, free of charge. Now, starting off with the actual recap of what happened in the lock and dog for the last episode. We swept again, back-to-back sweeps, had a nice win with the lock. We had Zverev minus 1.5 games at minus 113 against Shelton. Won the first set, then he actually should have probably lost the second set as he was down 3-6 in the breaker. But Shelton lost 5 points in a row. Zverev won in straight sets, and he cashed the spread. So nice win there for the lock. For the dog, we had a nice win. We had de Minaur over 1.5 breaks against Alcaraz at plus 110. Even though Alcaraz is now 5 in a lifetime against him, de Minaur has gone over this number in 4 of the 5. De Minaur broke twice. He still can't serve, so Alcaraz won anyway. But either way, de Minaur did go over the breaks line. So nice sweep there for the lock and dog picks. Now, we have a bit of a segue, which is a bit of unfortunate news. You might have noticed I scheduled an episode recording for yesterday. My Wi-Fi went down. Optimum had an outage in my area for about 16 hours, maybe, give or take. So I was going to record an episode. I actually did all the research for the matches on Tuesday, and then I had to pull the plug because the Wi-Fi broke, and apparently there was an outage in my area, which is unfortunate. Even more so because we actually would have swept the lock and dog picks for the matches on Tuesday. A couple of people messaged me on Twitter asking for my plays. I actually just gave them my lock and dog plays if they asked me. So they can vouch for me. But either way, I did have 2 plays that would have won. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually give them out on the show because my Wi-Fi came back at 11 a.m. and the Alcaraz match already started. So apologies there. It is what it is. Point is, pretty fun collection of matches on Tuesday. Out of curiosity, if you were wondering, my plays would have been Alcaraz team total over 12.5 at minus 140, and a miracle win, actually, between de Minaur and Musetti. It would have been the over 4.5 combined breaks, which was completely dead to rights. And then de Minaur got broken serving for the match, and he got broken again to stay in the match, and that ended up resulting in 5 breaks in the match. So basically a miracle that would have ended up cashing the sweep there, but either way, it is what it is. The Wi-Fi had other ideas, and I had to pull the plug. Before the matches, in general, on Tuesday, after seeing a bunch of straightforward wins, we finally had some drama. So Alcaraz was able to get the job done in 3 against Fritz. Can't say I'm that surprised by how competitive it was, because Fritz is the defending runner-up on the courts here. Courts in Turin play fast, so I'm not surprised that Fritz serves well and had some chances to win the match outright. But Alcaraz, we know, is too good, and he got the job done in the end. So for the actual, I'd say, script here, Alcaraz lost the first set in a tiebreak. Pretty straightforward, a 7-2 in the breaker. Then you ended up seeing Fritz have a couple of breakpoint chances in the 2-2 game to take a lead, and then he ended up not converting. And then you eventually saw Alcaraz got the break in the final game of the second set pre-tie break. So pretty rough beat if you had the breaker, but either way, Alcaraz did win the second set 7-5. And at that point, it felt like the match was over because Fritz just didn't have much left in the tank, and Alcaraz kind of raised his level. And at that point, it was over, and Alcaraz ended up winning 6-3 in the final set. Now, for the other matchup, it was pure drama, which I think we all expected. Bit of a weird turning point in the match because a person in the crowd collapsed, and they ended up having to take a delay, and the delay kind of saved Musetti. So Musetti ended up falling behind in the third set, got the break back when de Minaur was serving for the match, and ended up breaking again to win the match. de Minaur was the better player for the majority of the actual match itself. Musetti was good early. de Minaur ended up winning the second set, and then he got a break lead immediately. But it really did feel like the temporary suspension of play helped out Musetti, and that allowed Musetti to kind of get back on track as he got the job done there. Now, same story, different year. de Minaur, very good player, still can't serve, which is definitely, I'd say, his Achilles heel. And we saw that again against Musetti and against Alcaraz. And I believe now, excluding the Laver Cup exhibition, you have seen de Minaur lose 16 straight matches against top 10 opponents. 16 straight against top 10 guys. So, look, I thought de Minaur was going to win personally today, so I was a bit wrong on that. Of course, didn't give it out because we didn't do a show. I thought de Minaur would win in 3. That was my initial prediction, but I'm not surprised by how it played out. The main question mark was Musetti, really with his overall fitness, because he had to play so many matches to get into Turin. Then he had to play again, and he lost pretty handily to Fritz. There were questions on the fitness and if he'd be able to actually look sharp enough, so that was kind of my main concern. But de Minaur serving, betraying him, is a tale as old as time, and Musetti got the job done in that one. So a very fun match. Definitely the match of the day. I see a comment saying that de Minaur served well early in the match. He did. Once again, it felt like once you had the suspension of play in the third set, Musetti started to see the serve a bit better, and then he ended up breaking because de Minaur tightened up and you got back-to-back breaks. But overall, de Minaur, I think, served better than anticipated in the first 2 sets. But then once it got into that third set, it felt like Musetti started to get the timing down a little bit more. de Minaur was hitting some pretty solid serves out wide towards the end of that third set. But Musetti, once he actually was able to get the ball in play, seemed like he was a bit more aggressive on the baseline, and that did result in a couple of very nice, I don't know if they were exactly winners or they were forcing errors from de Minaur. I think for his standards, de Minaur served well early, but at the same point, eventually the clock struck midnight, and de Minaur's serve got broken when he needed to hold on. So Musetti got the job done. He was definitely out of gas, I'd say, in the beginning stages of the third set. That's why he was smacking his legs early on. Once again, suspension definitely helped out. I see Matt asking if I think Musetti's uncle faked it. I don't think he actually faked it because I don't know if people are aware of this. 2 people died in attendance at the ATP Finals a day or 2 ago. So I don't know if it's a U.S. Open humidity thing where even though it's in, or I should say in an indoor environment, the humidity might just be crazy in there. But I don't think he faked it because 2 separate people died watching the matches earlier this past week. So there's been a couple of really, I'd say, morbid updates regarding the actual conditions there in Turin. Then again, I know the people that passed away were older. I think they were in their 70s, so I don't know if it was fully involving the conditions, but I don't think he faked it because 2 people literally died while being in attendance about a day prior, which is very, very weird. But either way, point is a nice overall collection of matches for Tuesday. A lot of drama. I think Alcaraz winning was really never in doubt, but Fritz did give it a good showing. And then the Musetti and de Minaur match was just an absolute slugfest that came down to the wire, and Musetti held on just long enough to win. I believe Musetti is now 4-1, I think, in the head-to-head. I see Matt, by the way, correcting me that somebody died outside the stadium. Point is, conditions have been relatively weird, and we've seen a couple of fan issues over the course of the first few days. So I don't know if it's the overall, I'd say, conditions in Turin or the conditions inside the actual arena, but there have been some, I'd say, upsetting updates regarding fan conditions and overall fan health, which is definitely a concern that we should keep an eye on. But it did impact, in my opinion, the match against Musetti and de Minaur, mostly the suspension for about 5-10 minutes to kind of kill momentum there for de Minaur. Anyway, time to move on into the actual breakdown of the matchups for Tuesday. The 2 matchups, by the way, are going to be between Shelton and Felix and Sinner and Zverev. So we get Sinner Zverev again for about the 3rd time in 2+ weeks. But either way, before we get into any of those matchups, a reminder, they're brought to you by our sponsor, Book.ag. You can bet on football, tennis, basketball, hockey, you name it. They're also a prop builder second to none. They have a lot of options for funding your account, and I recommend using crypto. So check out the crypto options they have for deposits, and you can also get paid out in crypto, which is convenient. When you head to my Book.ag, use the code SGPN for a special 100% back bonus up to $5 for customers. MyBookieDG promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Novig. So if you're interested in checking out exchanges or prediction markets, recommend Novig, the number one prediction market for sports in America. Get some great reduced juice. So find some great prices by shopping around on Novig, available in 30 plus states. Download the app when you do so. Get a nice deal with us. Get $50 when you spend just $5 if it's a promo code SGPN, and then actually Novig promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the recap of what happened on Tuesday. Time to move on into the two matchups for Wednesday. Starting off with Felix taking on Shelton. Now, for this one, Shelton, decent favorite, actually. Minus 180, give or take. Felix is around plus 140 for the spread. I see minus 2.5 for Shelton, plus 2.5 for Felix, and the over-under is at 23.5. Now, the team totals are intriguing potentially. I did see Shelton at around either a juice 12.5 or 13.5 at plus money. Felix was around 12.5 at around minus 115. Now, for the head-to-head, they faced off one time before. It was on clay, and Felix buried him. Now, I'm going to point out, once again, it being on clay does matter. Shelton gave Alcaraz a run in the French Open a couple months ago, but they faced off last year. Felix, we know, is the better clay player, and the point is he won in straight sets. So no meetings ever on hard court. Now, Shelton had his first ever match in this event last time out, and he lost to Zverev in straight sets. Should have won a set, ended up punting away the breaker despite leading 6-3 in the tiebreak, but either way, did end up losing. Did not face a break point, or did not force a break point in the entire match. The return skills, not great for Shelton, which you already knew. For Felix, he's been in good form lately, made the final in Paris, did lose to Sinner. No shame in that. Then took a week off, ended up getting it anyway, and then ended up having to face Sinner again and lost, not forcing a single break point. So both guys not exactly played, they didn't return well, if we're being honest here, in their first matches. Then again, Sinner, we know, is basically unbeatable on these courts. He won every match last year in this event in straight sets. I believe he lost the fewest games of all time at this event. So no shame to Felix. In fact, a bit of encouragement. He got the 7-5 in the first set. Good enough. Honestly, good enough. You held 5 times in a row. Good enough for me. But either way, Shelton lost to Zverev. Zverev owns him in the head-to-head, and Shelton really did not return well. It makes sense when you factor in his lack of return skills in general, and you include the fast-paced courts here and the lack of experience for Shelton on these courts. Not surprised that Shelton struggled to return, but we know Felix is also a very good server. So Shelton's return game might be problematic for himself over the course of these 2 or 3 sets. Now, starting off with the actual price for this match, the thing is the line suggests that Felix is injured, and I see Dark Knight mentioning it because Felix might play with an injury. We'll see if Bublik fills in. There have been some rumors that you might end up seeing a spot open up potentially if Felix really doesn't have it physically. So that has been a main talking point. Do I think Felix is going to no-show the match? No. I think he'll show up. Will he finish the match? We'll see. Felix, though, worked his ass off to get here. I don't see him dropping out pre-match. It would be interesting to see Bublik and Shelton, to be honest. But I think Felix gets through it. The fact is he did have a day off today, which helps. So we'll see how he looks. But the main reason why the line is so expensive in favor of Shelton are some injury rumblings regarding Felix, which involves him being maybe at 70%, give or take. We'll see. He fell apart against Sinner in the second set. Then again, when you play against Sinner, you can't tell how much of that's based on injury and how much that's based on Sinner being an absolute god on hard court. So tough to evaluate, but Shelton is favored because of it. Now, having said that, would I lay 170, 180 with Shelton? Absolutely not. I have no interest in that price. I think it is Felix or pass for me. Shelton, I think, is really just a one-trick pony. And the fact is, as long as Felix can look somewhat decent in the rallies, I think Shelton will hit enough errors to gift away free points to Felix, or maybe he steals it. I will end up seeing a couple breakers in there. Not many breaks in general are projected for this matchup. But I do think for the actual pricing, 170 does feel kind of expensive for Shelton. But I do acknowledge the injury concerns for Felix. Now, the spread 2.5, I think it'd be Felix or pass, and the over-under, I don't mind the over. I think 2.5 sets is intriguing for the over. Point is, Shelton has only played one match here in his career. Didn't look good against Zverev, and I think Felix, assuming he's not totally injured, can serve well enough to neutralize the Shelton return game. Not saying much. I think Felix can hang around. I think he might win the match outright. but I do think this price feels expensive. If Felix was playing for the second straight day, I might take Shelton. But the day off in between, I think, can definitely help Felix out physically, and we'll go from there. Now, I do think that Shelton, once again, based on the injury news, it makes sense he's favored. But 170, I think, is kind of egregious. Felix can still walk. It's not like he is completely destroyed physically. I do think he'll look fine early. If it goes deep, will he be able to hold on? I'm not sure. But the fact is, Shelton and Felix are pretty comfortable shortening rallies. So I do see a lot of quick points that will not take up much energy from Felix. Not many 20-plus shot rallies, so to speak. So based on the quick nature of the points you should be getting in this match, I will pick it to be relatively close. I will go with Felix for value. But Shelton, I think, should be, in my opinion, at around minus 130, give or take. I think 170 feels pretty expensive. So based on that, I'm going to go with Felix as the dog. I don't mind the potential team total overs. If you want to go for a same-game parlay, hope for a 3-set marathon, I don't mind that. But I do think you'll see a couple of close sets, maybe a breaker in there. I think breaker was minus 150. So I do think you're going to see a longer match based on the absence of breaks. So give me the over in this one, and I don't mind potentially over 2.5 sets at about plus 140. Moving on to what could be a very straightforward match again, Sinner against Zverev. Now, Sinner is on an insane win streak here, won the title last year, still not dropping sets. The guy's an absolute demon. For Sinner, minus 770, sure. Zverev's plus 525. For the spread, minus 4.5 for Sinner, plus 4.5 for Zverev, and the over-under is around 20.5. Now, for the actual team total, Sinner, 12.5. The over-under is once again, a little bit juiced to the over, not by much, though. Minus 120 on the over, about minus 105 on the under, give or take. For Zverev, it's around over under 8.5 games. Under is minus 125. The over is minus 104. Straight sets for Zverev is minus 225. Zverev to win ace set is plus 170. Breaker in the match is plus 160. Now, we saw them face off last week in Paris, and that was as ugly as it could possibly be. Zverev was completely gassed after beating Medvedev in a 3-set marathon the round prior, and Sinner dropped one game. Uno. He beat him 6-0, 6-1. Now, Zverev was definitely not 100%. You could argue you could toss it out. Then again, we know Sinner has been in insane form since he showed up in Vienna, beat Zverev in the marathon in 3 sets, went through Paris, did not drop a set, showed up against Felix, did not face a break point, and won comfortably in straight sets again. So Sinner has not dropped a set in 6 straight matches. And the question is, which Zverev do we get? Do we get the one that won one game against Sinner in Paris, or do we get the Zverev that almost beat Sinner in 3 sets in Vienna? Now, the courts play fast, which I think benefits Sinner, because we know that Zverev wants to be very passive. You can't get away with that on these courts. It might work against Shelton. It's not going to work against Sinner. So I do think the court speeds actually benefit Sinner here because Sinner is so aggressive and so powerful. The ball striking will look even faster with how quickly the ball travels on these courts. So that's why Sinner is so unbeatable on these courts. The fact is, I know Zverev made some comments earlier in the year about how the ATP wants to slow courts down so we get Alcaraz versus Sinner finals, which is really dumb because Sinner likes fast-paced courts. So I don't really understand that logic at all. And I think Zverev feels the wrath of it in the match on a Wednesday. I think Sinner wins. I think it's pretty straightforward. The fact is Zverev should have dropped the set to Shelton. He served well. I get that. The thing about Zverev, though, is most of his good serving comes from his first serve percentage. The second serve's really not great. So if Zverev ends up seeing a dip in his first serve percentage, I think Sinner will be all over these second serves. And the fact is, Sinner, we know, has good court coverage, good firepower, and his serve is also very solid. I think Sinner wins pretty comfortably. You could argue maybe a breaker in there, which I wouldn't oppose per se, because the court speeds do suggest you might get a lot of breaks. I should say a lot of breakers and not so many breaks in general. But I think Sinner's too good. I think Zverev got a pretty weak opponent in Shelton, who may or may not be the worst opponent in the entire field. You could argue him or de Minaur, but either way, we know Sinner is number 1 in the world for a reason. I think Sinner wins. You could argue maybe 6-4, 6-4, maybe get a breaker in there, followed by a coasting like we saw against Felix in the first match, which was a long first set, straightforward second set. Do I think Zverev threatens to win? No, I don't. I think Sinner wins in straight sets. I think it might end up being 6-4, 6-4 I'll go with that scoreline. But Zverev might have moments. I don't see many. I think Sinner will have a lot of chances, and I think his firepower is too much for Zverev to handle, who wants to be passive. That doesn't work on the courts here. So I'll go for Sinner to win this one in straight sets. But since there is really no value on that at minus 220, the 4.5 games I think feels right to me. Now, it is juiced heavily to Zverev. I should say it's juiced heavily to Sinner at minus 140. So I don't want that. I guess it would, in theory, be Zverev plus the games, but I'm not going to take that. Instead, I'll go for the team totals. I'll go for the team total under on Zverev for this one. I think Sinner wins again in his very comfortable environment in Turin. A reminder, in Italy, home crowd advantage, which has helped out. Give me Sinner to win comfortably in this match against Zverev in the group stage. Anyway, let's wrap it up for the two matches for Wednesday. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. Before we get into the lock and dog, reminder brought to you by our sponsor, which is on Fantasy. So you could do Fantasy Pick'em entries, chance to win 5,000 times your money. You could also check out the new offer for new customers. Play just $5 and $100 bonus funds. Use promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. They're crushing it in college football, the NFL, and now they add the NBA. They also have college basketball if you want to check that out as well. They also are doing giveaways every week just for tracking your bets in the app. So check out their weekly cash prize giveaway. Track 5 bets of any type from a model that you built, and you can win 1K. And a reminder, we also have a nice discount code with Rhythm. So if you use the code SGPN25, when you download the app, you can get a quarter off first month. Download Rhythm, using a promo code SGPN25 for quarter off your first month. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Finished going through the breakdown of the matches for Wednesday. Time to move on into the lock and dog picks. For the lock, I'll go back to the last matchup. Give me the Zverev team total under 8.5 at minus 125. End of the day, Sinner has been in God mode lately, and we know when Sinner is feeling it on hard court, nobody can beat him. So I think Sinner wins comfortably. 5 of Sinner's last 6 opponents have gone under this team total. I think he's going to look sharp here. Once again, he has won 6 straight matches in straight sets. I think it's a good way to find straight sets for a cheaper price. Zverev also, I will point out, has not been good in the head-to-head, as Sinner is 4-0 in the last 4 meetings. Last meeting, yes, Zverev was compromised, but Sinner did win 6-0, 6-1. I think Sinner right now is just seeing the ball clearly. I think the courts benefit his skill set tremendously, and I think Zverev's going to feel the wrath on Wednesday. Give me Sinner to dominate. Give me Zverev team total under 8.5. I'm going to take this, though, instead of the Sinner team total under, because Sinner can, in theory, still get there if there's a breaker or 7-5. We saw that against Felix, for example. There is a chance that Zverev maybe forces a 7-5 and then gets buried in the second set. That's possible, too. But I am going to go with the Zverev team total under. I think Sinner's too good on these courts, and I think he'll toast in straight sets once again. Moving on to the dog, though. So there were some question marks about the injury status of Felix. Maybe he will feel it as the match goes on, but I will go for a marathon first set. Give me the Felix and Shelton first set over 10.5 games at plus 137 as my dog. Both guys are very good servers. We know that Felix on indoor hard courts is very good. Shelton, a very good server as well. Point is, though, both guys were abysmal returning in their matches. Shelton against Zverev and Felix against Sinner. Both guys forced 0 break points in their matches. So both guys not really returning that well on the fast-paced courts here. Both guys can serve bombs on the first serve. I don't see many breaks, if any, in the first set and in the match in general. So I do see a good script for a nice over. Plus, Felix has actually not had much success against lefties lately, and the first sets have been very close. So 4 of Felix's last 5 matches against lefties have gone over this first set total. So for whatever reason, Felix doesn't match up quite well against lefties, which might be factored into the actual price as well for Shelton. But I think you're going to end up seeing a lot of holds early in this match on the fast-paced courts. Maybe both guys settle in return-wise in the second set. But I like the price. Both guys did not force a break point in the first group stage match. Both guys are good at serving, and I do think the court speeds should result in a pretty tough environment for either guy to break. Give me the first set over 10.5 games is my dog for the show. So once again, for the Wednesday matches in the ATP Finals for the group stage, the lock's going to be on Zverev, team total under 8.5 minus 125. For the dog, I'll go with Felix and Shelton, first set over 10.5 games at plus 137. It's going to wrap up for the show, and we'll be back once again later on in the week to get into more group stage matches. Till next time, you can find me on Twitter, Reichel Radio. Find the podcast on Spotify or Apple. Leave a rating and a review. Find the podcast on YouTube. And once again, don't forget to like and subscribe. Till next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.